this is just the beginning.
Welcome to the third Axios live stream event that we've done of the coronavirus era. This one is looking at your financial data, your privacy, this unique moment in American history. We'd like to thank Vault 12, a crypto security company, for making this broadcast possible. It's a real treat for us at Axios that tens of thousands of people have been watching these events. Typically, we do them as physical events here in DC or New York, or around the country. You might get 300 or 400 or 500 people that you can pack into a room. So it's great to have these conversations where we can invite a lot more people into the conversation. You can watch and follow this on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, or on Axios.com. Follow us, please, at Axios and hashtag Axios Events. We're going to have 3 interviews today, all looking at data, all looking at your finances. Continue to send in questions. We've got hundreds of them. Several of them will be integrated into the questions that I asked. Up first, we have entrepreneur, Democratic presidential candidate, and prolific tweeter himself, Andrew Yang. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, it's great to be here. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're safe and sound.
Same to you. It's a treat to have you here. As I was saying, you're a prolific tweeter. Last night, you're on Twitter. And while I want to talk about data privacy, you have a topic that you've talked a ton about, and you were tweeting about it last night that I wanted to get a little more lens into your thinking on. You tweeted about this idea of a $2,000 payment per month to each American during the coronavirus. Are you talking about over an extended period of time? And would this be, in your mind, should it be for every American? Walk me through that.
Well, right now, stimulus checks are arriving in people's accounts, but millions of Americans, even tens of millions of Americans, have been out of work for a month, and their bills are mounting. So they get $1,200. That enables them to pay last month's bills. And let's say they're home for another month. What are they going to do? Congress needs to make these checks ongoing for the duration of the crisis. And I'm arguing for $2,000 a month while we're all stuck at home, which is going to be enough to take a load off of millions of Americans. We're in unprecedented levels of joblessness among Americans. I think I saw yesterday that the ratio of working Americans to population is lower than it's ever been right now. It's inching towards 50%. So we need to make very dramatic moves to allow millions of Americans to have, frankly, the knowledge that they can feed their families in the days to come.
But that, assuming that the virus and sort of the lockdown that comes from it, especially in different parts of the country, could go on for many, many months, you're talking about trillions of dollars in additional money that would go out from the federal government into people's paychecks instantaneously, correct?
Yes, I am. And when the house is on fire, you don't worry that much about the water you're using to put it out. We have the equivalent of a $21 trillion fire on our hands, and we have to do everything we can to help people get through this. I mean, in the absence of this kind of stimulus, you would see unthinkable things happening. I mean, unthinkable things are happening right now in the United States of America. You know, you have mass graves, and people doing really heartbreaking things to try and keep themselves safe. But things can get even worse if you have people literally facing mass deprivation and they're not sure how they're even going to put food on the table. So this, to me, is a necessary investment in the preservation of our economy and society. And again, if you have a $21 trillion fire, you don't worry that much about the money you're spending to put the fire out.
Have you talked to Joe Biden or his staff about this concept? Do you think this is something that the Democratic Party as a whole could rally around? Because you don't have that much time. They'd have to rally quickly and really build up a lot of public support for this.
There are dozens of legislators that are going to be pushing forward this plan. And I'm in touch with members of Congress. I was just texting with Joe's team yesterday. Joe's not himself a big texter, so I'm not like texting Joe all the time. But yeah, I'm in touch with a bunch of people who are going to be pushing forward a plan that's essentially identical to what I'm championing right here.
Do you think Joe Biden himself will champion this idea?
I think Joe's a very, very smart, practical leader, and he knows we need to do everything we can to provide for people in a time of crisis.
During the campaign, you spent a lot of time talking about this idea of a universal basic income, largely at that time, your fear about the effect that automation it can have on the entire workforce. That basically you're going to have industries that could be obliterated almost overnight because of the speed of technology and its ability to really upend almost any job, any industry. And now we're looking at it from a pandemic lens. Like, walk me through like how you now think about the fears you have for the workforce today with the pandemic being stacked on top of the automation fears that you had.
The 5 most common job categories in the United States are administrative and clerical work, sales and retail, food service and food preparation, truck driving and transportation, and manufacturing. And those jobs are getting obliterated in many parts of our economy. A third of America's stores and malls were closing prior to the crisis. Now you've closed probably 80% of them. Macy's just furloughed the vast majority of their 130,000 employees. How many of those employees do you think they're going to rehire? Do we really think that every Macy's is going to suddenly reopen and be back to at 100% capacity? A lot of these jobs are gone for good. This is not like a rubber band that's going to snap back into place. And you know this, anyone who talks to CEOs knows this. The CEOs are already looking at ways to do more with fewer people, that they're automating processes, they're going to shrink office places. A lot of the people that are working from home are going to continue working from home, but there are a lot of people who've lost their jobs that are never going to see their jobs return. So this is unfortunately accelerating the trends I was most concerned about into the space of days and weeks instead of months and years. I've been saying that we're going to see 10 years worth of change in 10 weeks. And that's going to mean many, many millions of Americans are kicked to the curb in terms of their ability to support themselves in the jobs that they once had.
Another topic that you've talked about, tweeted about, is data privacy. I feel like most people watching this are kind of like me or my family. You just kind of click your way through life. You're not thinking a ton about the data that other people have access to and sort of the danger of having sort of the capabilities for other governments, for companies, for people to know so much about us. Tell me, like, why should I care? Like, why is that such a big topic? Why is it something that people don't pay that much attention to, but they should?
Our data is getting sold and resold and packaged and repackaged without us really knowing what is going on. And one thing that you should care about is that you're talking about billions, tens of billions of dollars worth of value that's changing hands, and you're not seeing a dime. None of us are. So one of the things that I champion on the campaign trail is that our data should be ours, even if we loan it to tech companies for our own convenience. And we should be able to see what they're doing, be able to turn it off if we want. And if there's value that is changing hands, we should be participating in that. So that is, to me, like a data bill of rights that we as citizens should have, because we're completely outgunned by these trillion-dollar tech companies that are right now making us think that we're making our own decisions while they're leaving digital breadcrumbs and profiting at every step.
And what's the advice that you would give your, there's a question we actually had from one of our viewers, like what's advice that you would give your family in terms of things you should avoid if you don't want people to know way, way too much about you? Things that we might not think of. Are there specific products, specific companies that we should be more fearful of?
No, I don't want to call out specific companies. I would say that as a whole, we as citizens and consumers are completely and hopelessly outmatched and outgunned, where no one actually reads those statements. We just click I agree, and then we hope for the best. What I'm saying is that as a people, we need a counterweight to the technology giants that right now are profiting from our data and leaving us out in the cold. And so my organization, Humanity Forward, is actually working on an initiative in that direction. What I would say to folks, instead of saying somehow, frankly, that individual consumers can just avoid this entire data selling and reselling phenomenon if you just avoid a handful of bad actors, frankly, that's just not the case, because this is the industry standard. And the only way you could avoid it entirely is if you were to unplug entirely, which is not realistic for virtually any of us, especially now that we're all stuck at home. I mean, if you imagine trying to unplug now, then you'd be missing this conversation, and you wouldn't be able to talk to, like any of your relatives that are outside of your house.
Quick final question before you go, political question. There's been some talk that you might one day want to be mayor of New York. Do you want to be mayor of New York?
I want to help solve the problems that are coming down the pike. And unfortunately, those problems are getting
mayor of New
bigger.
York?
Well, that's a high impact role. I got, my organization, Humanity Forward, has already distributed 1.3 million in economic relief, the majority of which went to families in the Bronx. So I'm just trying to solve problems. And unfortunately, this crisis has accelerated many of those problems that I saw coming in the months ahead, but now they're here right now.
I will take that as a yes, even though it was an indirect one. Thank you very much, Andrew Yang. We're now going to have a quick conversation with Max Skibinsky, who is the CEO of our sponsor of this program, Vault 12. That Vault 12 is a company that, if you're not familiar with it, deals with crypto security. Max, explain, what does that even mean? Like, help me do like crypto security for dummies, and I'll be the dummy.
Sure. So fundamentally, what we do is we provide everybody with a very easy way to safeguard their digital assets. And we do that by letting people build distributed peer-to-peer decentralized vaults. And core technology here is because mathematical keys that are root of any cryptocurrency require such robust, decentralized, surveillance-proof storage mechanism that our solution is kind of keeps these keys that mathematical foundations very secure.
And why should we care? Why should people care about the security of their information?
Is that our definition of digital assets is changing at what a couple of years ago was just mathematical keys for cryptocurrencies. Now these digital assets include kind of a lot more. It's your personal financial data. It's your personal medical records. It might be even your online passwords and online privacy data. Actually, I think what's going to happen over the next couple of years is that we're going to see kind of massive clash between people desire for privacy and governments around the world desire for much greater surveillance, in part because of completely reasonable desire to provide biological security for their borders, for their workforce. And the only solution out of this actually going to be mass adoption of, say, mathematical cryptography that is basis of cryptocurrencies, how people can basically provide these mathematical proofs that, yes, I have this vaccination, I'm safe to travel, I'm safe to do this and this, without sacrificing your personal privacy.
You and I had a fascinating conversation yesterday, and something you said stood out to me. You said that there is an upside to this virus. You would never wish it upon us, but you were saying that you believe that it's opening the eyes of all companies, that you can now adopt the same productivity tools as Google, as Apple, as others, and that they ultimately will emerge from this even more productive. Why?
Yeah. I think there is a small silver lining in the current crisis, and of course, right now there is lots of pain, lots of job losses. So we're definitely in the middle of pouring fire on burning house. But I think after we passed that immediate crisis management stage, there is some positive developments, because what fundamentally was happening is that virus forcing every company on the planet, every workforce on the planet, to adopt same productivity tools we have been already using in Silicon Valley for years, because we already know how to use Slack for team organization, how to use Zoom for meetings, how to use all remote collaboration tools to keep our regional team synchronized. So for Silicon Valley, there is nothing new. Usually it takes 10 to 15 years to educate workforce how to use these tools, for new people to enter workforce who are familiar with latest tools. And one of side effects of this virus, I think, is that now it basically forced education for the whole planet, how you would run your company, how your workforce would operate, pretty much exactly the same way as Google and Apple run their companies today. And over long term, I think we're going to see massive increase in productivity, massive increase in wealth creations, of course, once we passed that immediate calamity we're in right now.
And when you think about this, the future, right, the dispersed workforce, remote workers, productivity tools, living sort of side by side in a digital world, well, how does cryptocurrency fit into that in your mind? Because it was a big deal, obviously sort of came to sort of popular attention, a lot of it around the financial crisis last time, a lot of talk about it around this crisis this time. How does that fit in?
So I think there is two parts to this question, and obviously, genesis moment for cryptocurrencies was financial crisis 10 years ago, and kind of that crisis destroyed our trust in financial institutions, so it gave birth to decentralized finance in form of cryptocurrencies. So one old proverb in cryptocurrency space is that cryptocurrencies are insurance policy against politicians, and that's pretty much literally what we see happening right now. But second, I think more interesting part is that cryptocurrencies are sort of native money of the internet, the native protocol of wealth transfer of the internet. And as we go into this far more online, far more collaborative world where everyone is online, everyone is using this online tool, I think it might be second genesis moment for cryptocurrencies, since we're just starting integrating this cryptocurrency payments protocols and pipelines in all future products, exactly when every company and workforce are moving to this online first mode of operation.
Thank you very much, Max. Thank you to Vault12 for being a sponsor of this program. Special treat for you now. You get to hear from Dan Primack, one of the smartest business reporters I've ever met, interviewing the CEO of Credit Karma. And then we'll wrap up where Dan and I will answer some questions that many of you sent in before and during the show.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. I am pleased to be joined by Ken Lin. So Ken founded Credit Karma in 2007. They just agreed like 2 months ago to be bought by over $7 billion by Intuit. Ken, thanks for joining.
Great to be here.
So Ken, let's start here. You guys do a lot now at Credit Karma, but what you are best known for is letting me and other people know what their credit scores are, which are sometimes these kind of things that we don't have great access to. Are you already starting to see any sorts of aggregate declines in credit scores with people missing rent payments and car payments, et cetera?
Not yet. I think with the beginning of the crisis, we saw a couple of things unfold. First was a shift in credit demand. So people doing a lot more research and understanding, moving from credit cards to personal loans and mortgage refinance. I think people were trying to shore up their finances ahead of a shelter in place. Now that we're shelter in place, what we're seeing is a marked decrease in the demand for credit. So a lot fewer inquiries, a lot less credit application, but a lot of engagement. So I think people are preparing for the next evolution, which is you're going to come out of shelter in place. You're going to be in a situation where you had maybe 2-3 months of no income, and you have to figure out how do you make ends meet. And I think that's sort of stage one is prep, stage two is sort of understanding, and stage three is reemergence. And I think that's what's going on in the economy.
Should people be concerned? You've got certain lenders who are giving people kind of almost bespoke deferrals, right? You talk, particularly smaller companies. You talk to the person who gave you your car loan, or maybe your landlord, and they say, "We understand you've got problems with April. We'll work it out in May, or we'll work it out in June when people come back." But often those payment systems that those people use, their own software, is kind of automated. Should people have concerns that even if they miss April and have a handshake agreement with their landlord, that they're still going to get their credit score dinged in the end?
Yeah, absolutely. I think consumers need to be very proactive here. So I think what they need to do is they need to, one, reach out to the lenders. I think that people give financial services companies way too much credit in general understanding of their specific situation. So there's a lot of data flowing out there. But the reality is most financial services companies don't know the relative amount of hardship that you're in. So you need to get pretty proactive. You need to call those particular companies. And then on top of that, I think you should document it all. I think that there is a lot of things going on in the economy. There is a lot of change and a lot of turmoil. And I think to the extent that you're proactive, that you document the conversations, the outcome, that only goes to help you in the end. So I think consumers really need to do those things.
One last question on this. Are we going to be at a point, let's assume we come out of this in the summer or the fall, or maybe even this time next year. And I'm kind of thinking back to the financial crisis when obviously you had a lot of people miss payments and had FICO scores go down. Should folks feel, you know what, this might become, my credit score that I've worked really hard to get high might get lowered. But in the end, it's not going to really matter because all the levels are going to change. The mortgage company is going to realize that everybody is down X percent. So I'm not going to get hit as hard as I would have, say, 5 months ago.
Yeah, well, I think that it has to work its way through the system. And I think there is, sort of the note that the tide, rises all boats or lowers all boats. I think that's certainly true. But I think you want to be ahead of the tide, right? I think in a world where everything does go down, you as an individual, there's the average, and then there's what you can be to be above or below that average. And I think it's very important that consumers think about that average and where they want to be. So, while you might not want to think about your credit and your finances, I think the people who prepare now will be in a better situation for the recovery. So that means more availability of credit, the ability to get back on your feet. And, I think financing and credit is the ability to bridge, sort of this part of your life with, maybe a more excessive or sort of more bountiful part of your life. And I think that's important. So I think consumers who prepare now will be better prepared, will be in a better situation.
Speaking of preparing now, talk a little bit. You guys are going to announce, I guess, next week that you've got a new product and you're calling it Relief Roadmap. What exactly is it and why are you doing it?
Well, if you look across the spectrum, everyone is shelter in place right now. And when they come out of shelter in place, a lot of people are going to be hurt in terms of, 8 weeks, 12 weeks of no income, but still a lot of bills. And when you look across the board from the federal government to the state and local government to private companies, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of programs. And at Credit Karma, what we have always had is a focus on helping consumers understand their own financial profile. So we're leveraging that platform. So we're going to quickly be able to assess your financial profile with all of the programs out there and the various qualifications. So for example, in San Francisco, there is a moratorium on evictions. So if you live in San Francisco, which obviously we know because we have your address, we'll notify you that, hey, you're not going to be evicted for the X amount of days. If you have, if a bank is offering a deferment program or a loan forgiveness program, we're going to be able to let you know that, hey, so-and-so bank is actually offering this, and we know you have a trade line or relation with that bank. Here are the processes and steps that you need to do to actually go and claim those deferments and those opportunities. So we've put all of our resources and rallied the company around making sure that we can help as many Americans as possible in the time of need.
On the data side, then, so you're talking about some of the information you know about me, for example, where I live in San Francisco. So is this program you guys just leveraging data you already have access to, or is it also on the other end providing you more data about us as well?
Well, it's actually leveraging all of the data and sort of the first party relationships that we have with our members. So you have to keep in mind, and I think Andrew said this well, which is, consumers are hopelessly outgunned in many ways, and particularly when it comes to financial services, banks and financial services companies have so much data on the evaluation of credit and ability to grant credit. And what we've always tried to do is we've tried to level the playing field. So we help arm our members with the data that the banks are seeing on a day-to-day basis. We're using machine learning to tell them which products they qualify for. We are, providing certainty that they're going to be approved if they apply for those products. So it's the consumer's data. We fundamentally think about how do we arm consumers to best take advantage of the opportunities that exist in the marketplace.
Can I ask a little bit broader? So this morning there was a company that raised a bunch of money, a startup. It's kind of a digital authentication company, but they're kind of talking about creating a coronavirus passport. And the idea is basically if I was already infected with COVID and then I've cleared it and I have antibodies and I've been tested, I could maybe get into a restaurant or go back to work. But my question for you is, do you feel we're going to get to the point where our personal physical health data and our financial health data are going to be essentially merged? They're going to be one and the same. And eventually I will be on Credit Karma and I'm going to be getting offered really specific health products as well as, a car loan product.
I think that's probably pretty far off in terms of the merging of the two. I think when you look at just the various laws that exist in terms of data privacy and protection, but I certainly do believe that there's a moment in time when consumers will have firm control of their financial data. I think that we're certainly championing that. I think it's fundamentally important. The industry has gotten fundamentally more complex over the years, and our belief is that consumers should both have the upside of the complexity and the products, but also more control, and that's certainly where we focused at Credit Karma.
Ken, one of the things you guys have on the platform is tax filing, free tax filing software. Obviously, the deadline is supposed to be today. Today is theoretically tax day. It is no longer.
Sure.
So, twofold question for you. One, just from an internal operations perspective, how hard was it for you guys to basically re-engineer something which was already set to April 15th? Did you just have to change one piece of code, or was it more? And then the second piece of that, you guys are being bought by Intuit, whose products include TurboTax. Is there any kind of tension between those two things? You guys having a free product, they obviously charge a lot for theirs.
So to your first part of your question, yeah, I mean, absolutely, a lot of things have to change. You have the filing for extensions. There's various states as well, so it's not just one tax product. It's roughly 51 tax products when you think about it, or slightly less. Some states don't have tax, but also delays our future development. So that's another impact of this is that normally we would start actually planning tax season 5 for us. So next year's tax program, and so obviously we're delaying that for 3 months. So meaningful impact to the company. In regards to TurboTax and Intuit, I mean, I think we have the same view that it's fundamentally important. We believe free is important, just like Intuit feels that free is important. They have a free product as well. So at the end of the day, I don't think there is any conflict. We have a fundamental belief that consumers have a right to this data, right to all of these services. And we just go about it slightly different ways. But, we think at the end of the day, consumers will be better off for the products that we both have in market.
Ken, a question from a reader, an Axios reader from San Francisco, who asks, you now, I assume, have most of your employees working from home. As a financial data company, what's been the biggest challenge in transitioning from a lot of your folks working in a physical office to working at home?
I think the separation, I think things hit, like some people live alone and, some people have childcare, and all of these things actually have a real impact in the community, the culture that you create. And we spent a lot of time, our first 12 years, creating an amazing culture in the office. And now we're adjusting to how does that work when you have kids running around, when you have to worry about, a 5-year-old that might not be able to take care of themselves. So we're all adjusting to that. We're flexing our times. We're being much more communicative. We're being much more flexible in the work hours that we have to ensure that we provide our employees the flexibility and options that they need to be successful.
Ken Lin from Credit Karma, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please bring Jim Vandehei back. Jim.
I'm back. Hey, Dan, we're going to wrap up with questions that we had. It came in before and during the show from viewers. A big theme of the questions, and I think you're perfectly positioned to answer this because you covered the .com boom and bust. You covered the financial crisis and the aftermath, and now you're covering, obviously, business and deals. You're old, and you've seen a lot. Yeah, when you talk to business leaders, we're a month, 2 months into this, how do you think the world in terms of the business world, our work life world, will be different after this than it was before?
I do think it's going to change. For starters, I know there have been some people who said, well, everyone's now just going to work from home, who can, white collar jobs who can work from home. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think we are social animals. We like seeing people. We like getting out of our house, and there's routines and the place we get lunch and our cup of coffee. I think a lot of that's going to maintain. But I think one place for sure is travel, right? We, and Jim, I can speak for you, I think, and I can speak for me. We're pretty quick to hop on a plane, to fly pretty far to go have a meeting even, or to go have a couple meetings. I definitely think that might slow down a little bit when people start to think about the amount of time and even the kind of health impacts on that. So I think business travel is one place that things are definitely going to change.
And how much will companies be at a disadvantage, if you think back to the conversations we've even had in the last half hour, if you're not quick to be able to use Zoom or use Slack or use messaging or just all these different technologies that a lot of the tech companies have used pretty successfully because they have dispersed and remote workforces? Will they be penalized? Are those going to be the companies that suffer the most? Is that sort of table stakes now to be a functioning company?
I think it's probably table stakes to be a functioning company. But again, I work from my house, right? And you work in DC, I'm up in Boston, so it's a little bit different. I do feel though there is value in kind of tactile, a group of people around the same physical table as opposed to everybody on screens in front of them. I think there is value in that. But yeah, look, I think, but to be honest, I think we were now here, right? I think everyone can use Zoom or some other sort of video conferencing tool or Slack. If you're not using those things, I think the place where it's really going to hit you is when you try to bring in new employees. I've certainly been at jobs where I've shown up and said, wait, you guys aren't doing X or using this either piece of software or some other sort of technology. I think it'll be the same thing going forward. You're going to have to do this in order to, if not recruit new employees, when they show up, have them not just shake their head and say, I've made a huge, giant mistake.
And I think what you said at the beginning makes a lot of sense to me, because like running the company now remote, I think we're as productive, if not more productive than ever before. I think we're as connected, if not even more connected than ever before. Yet a month in, you can just see in like the expressions and the emails and the messages, like just the loneliness. Like people really, we are human creatures. We do crave like physical connectivity. And I do think that whatever the future is after this, all these tools will make us more productive. It might make it easier for me to work from a fishing boat one day, but you're always going to need that physical contact. And if anything, I think people appreciate it more now than they did pre-crisis. So Dan, I appreciate your interview. I appreciate your comments, appreciate what you do for Axios. To everyone watching, thank you for tuning in. We have a big lineup of these. We're going to do some on education. We're going to do some on business. If there's topics that you wish that we could do, that we could bring guests to you live, please let me know. I'm Jim@Axios.com. I am on this stupid device all the time. So email me. We love your input. Thank you for watching, and please visit Axios.com. Stay safe, stay healthy.